because I now refer I got this from Dr. Obadele Cambone, who calls Jesus the white boy on a stick. And it's a white boy on a stick syndrome. Now, I get in trouble for that. Some people have, I might have to run down the street tomorrow, is all I'm saying. But there's something happens to, and you talked about this when you were like 3 years old, there's something that happens to a child when they are imbued, indoctrinated, and proselytized before their brains are fully developed, before their nervous systems have a chance to develop, that when there's something that happens where at a certain age, they no longer see themselves in the data. They no longer see themselves in the human family. They no longer see themselves mattering. There's this superimposition of a story of slavery that was backed by Jesus and Christ and God ordained. And when I hear that, it's something that happens inside of me. Kaba's coming back on. He's having some tech issues. Kaba, you there? You got some? Are you on Chrome, brother?
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back. Ain't nobody gonna stop.
I know that's right. I want you to tell the story, Professor Kaba, of what happens to Black children. I think it's between something from 0 to 6 where they first start seeing themselves in the family. They have a Black identity, but something happens to them in the educational system that's backed by that Christian system, where they start to no longer see themselves. And that is when they stop really trying to learn. They become quote unquote labeled HDD or HDHD and all of these special ed. I was a special ed child and student because I just didn't want to hear it. And I knew something was wrong, but there was nobody around. I came from illiterate parents. They didn't know. They did the best they could with what they had. Professor, if you could share that story with us, because I think that is a massive bridge and will also connect with Dr. Hagen's and his psychology of how the brain is pre-programmed and that we spend most of our lives running to stand still.
Well, just to give a little background so that I can move into answering the question. For those that may not know my background, I'm a retired New York City Board of Education teacher. And I've been a teacher, I've been administrator, I've worked on the city level and the state level and the federal level. So I've had exposure. I've taught all grades and I taught college for 14 years. And I've taught all subjects. My beginnings was in Gary, Indiana, in an all-Black high school called Roosevelt High School in Gary, Indiana. And I then came back to New York, started teaching in 1979, October of 1979. And so that's basically a preview into understanding, from my perspective, the way in which a child thinks and learns. Dr. Amos Wilson, in his books, Awakening the Genius in Black Children and the Psychology of Black Children, it's about the age of 3. And he says at the age of 3, children begin to notice things around them on a higher level than just seeing it out front.
They start to internalize certain things.
Yeah, they start to internalize things because their brain now has developed itself to a point where it has had a number of experiences, enough that they can now begin to synthesize and compare and do different things as it relates to their mind and their thinking. Dr. Wilson says this is when they begin to realize that daddy or mommy could be treated differently, whether it be things that mommy and daddy say, or if it's the society and how they react to them. For instance, when you go into a store and they follow you, or if they come up and they say, "Can I help you?" Simply from a harassing perspective, not because they're salespeople. Children then begin to feel mommy's hand tighten or daddy's hand tighten on them when things happen. They start to correlate. When mommy tightens their finger, my hand, she's not happy. So they begin to develop certain things. So now they start school. Let's say at the age of 4 or 5, they go into kindergarten. Now this is where I encounter them. in the early grades, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, fundamentally, you are learning to read. You learn phonics. You learn how to decode symbols like A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. You begin to decode. And it's fun. You're exposed to balloons and bears and Mickey Mouse and all the rest of the stuff, and it's fun. What children enjoy. You have little manipulatives that you use, that you enjoy counting and things like that. However, and this is where Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu comes in, as it relates to his fourth grade syndrome. See, because I've been on every level, so I know the child in the fourth grade that I had in the third grade. I have noticed something spiritual. Now, some people say it's intellectual. From an African perspective, everything comes out of the spiritual. Not necessarily, the intellect is impacted, there's no question. But there's a spiritual manifestation. There's a new child that comes into the fourth grade. Left third grade June, but now they're coming back September. And I say, oh, Kwame, that's you? The haircut, I notice a little bit of a difference. But in the fourth grade, it is assumed that you know how to read. So you're no longer learning to read. You are now reading to learn. Reading now becomes a tool to take the next higher order thinking skills to the next level. This is where white fragility, masking out of white supremacy, comes from. This is where you start to see George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. This is where you start seeing Albert Einstein. Not that I got anything against Albert Einstein, but everything is clouded with white men did everything. In the fourth grade, because that is where the social studies curriculum goes directly into U.S. history in the social studies area. You have four major subject areas. You have math and science, language arts, social science or social studies. Those are the four major ones. And then you have the arts and crafts, and you have the physical education. Those are considered minor, which to black children is ridiculous. Because if you see the doctors, the lawyers, and everybody that's in the major subject areas, and when you see the people who are in the arts and entertainment, and you look at how much each side is getting paid, most folk want to be a basketball player as opposed to a scientist. Because the people who are into sports and entertainment are the one with the big bucks. The ones that are into science and math, they make decent money, but they don't make the money that a musician makes. So right there's a paradox that children are facing.
Backwardsness.
What value does science and math have compared to if I can rap or play basketball? This is just a reality. We all know the merits of intellectual endeavor, science and math. We all understand that. But to a child is looking at something real. If I want to buy something and take money, who has the most money? Who's on the newspaper covers? Who's on the magazines? Who's on TV?
On the radio.
Who was it that made everybody scared of COVID-19? It was Tom Hanks. It was the basketball players. They were not worried about their own family. They were more concerned over actors and basketball players.
Wow.
What made everybody get real serious was when they shut down the basketball season. That's when people started saying, I think we have a pandemic here.
Yeah, I think we got a problem, Houston. Yeah.
Just to go back to, continuing the concept is that when a child is locked out of self,
yes.
What Richard Pryor used to always say, what did it mean to me? What did it mean to me? Children are saying, well, where am I in this? Everybody searches for themselves. And one of the things that I think, and again, going back to Dr. Ray's services, everybody in the room is both priest or priestess and participant. Everybody's part of the process. There's no way that you can be in a doctrine service and not see yourself, not just see yourself in it, but see yourself as a mover and doer and a shaker of what's going on. And so our children in the classroom who don't see themselves begin what Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu in The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, what he calls the fourth grade syndrome. It happens in the fourth grade. It's simultaneous with this new spirit that rises in the third grade, moving into the fourth grade, and then all of a sudden, you taught me to read for this? I thought you were going to teach me to read so I could find out more about myself.
Right. I say.
And so this is what happens as we begin to move through. Now, to tie that to my experience, growing up, Booker T. Coleman, there was always some cultural aspect. Most people that I came in contact would say, oh, you're named after Booker T. Washington. Oh, you're going to be a teacher. Well, when I was first introduced to Professor Clark, I was had just finished the 7th grade. I was 12 and a half, going on 13. And, I was basically 12 and a half. And the old heads brought us up to Harlem because I lived on 63rd Street, which is not far from Harlem. You know, we used to say that Hell's Kitchen was our backyard and Harlem was our front yard. Because the Amsterdam houses is where Lincoln Center is right now. And so we were on 63rd and 10th Avenue. If you go up a couple of blocks, you're in Harlem. If you go down a couple of blocks, you're in Hell's Kitchen. And so they brought us into Harlem. You know, they used to put us on the handlebars of their bike. You know, they would take us up to Harlem. And this one time, they brought us up to speak to Professor Clark. Well, to hear Dr. Clark speak. And at the end, they brought the young bloods up, myself included. There was about 5 or 6 of us. And when they introduced me, oh, this is Booker T. Coleman. He said, oh, Booker T., you're going to be a great teacher one day. And I said, oh, okay. You know, but that started a relationship. When I wanted to be a priest. I wanted to be a Roman Catholic priest. That's what happens when you grow up Roman Catholic. And you're a young man. I was a choir boy. I was an altar boy. And the next logical step is to become a priest. And so I was working in the church basement where the books and things where I was arranging things. And I came upon a book that spoke about this particular sect of priests that was protecting. This was a Polish in Poland. They were protecting the statue from the Nazis, and it was called Our Lady of Czestochowa. But in parentheses, it said Black Madonna and Child. It didn't have no picture. It just said Black Madonna and Child in parentheses. I was around 14. I was a sophomore in high school. I called Dr. Clark. I said, Dr. Clark, I was looking through a book and it talked about a Black Madonna and Child. I said, could you tell me something about that? And for those that know Dr. Clark, when Dr. Clark is about to hit you, you know what Bob Marley say about music and Trenchtown Rock? Music is the one thing when it hit, you don't feel no pain. So brutalize me with music. Well, Dr. Clark brutalized me with some knowledge. He told me to come up to his house. I went up to his house. He gave me a Xerox copy of a short story that he had written titled The Boy Who Painted Christ Black. He said, read this and call me. We'll talk about it. So I read it. I had never read anything like this in my life. In fact, it became a short story on HBO, I think. Blair Underwood played the part of the minister. And like I had never read anything like this before. I knew of it because of my past experiences in Santeria with my neighbors, but I had never seen it like this. So I call him, and I go up to his house, and he starts dropping some stuff on me. And I just, well, long story short, I came home, spoke to my parents. My mother went out and bought a special suitcase. My father was a tailor from Tuskegee, so he ironed my cassock and my surplice, which is the clothes you wear. And I went to my I went back to the church. Hadn't been to the church for a while. And I went back to the church, and my supervising priest said to me, he said, Booker, I think the church is losing you.
Mm.
And I put the suitcase on the table. I said, Father, the church has lost me.
Mm.